The wheels of the death wagon creaked like old bones as they rolled into Bitter Creek, Arizona territory. On a scorching August afternoon in 1881, the sun hung merciless in the bleached sky, casting long shadows across the dusty main street where tumbleweeds danced between weathered storefronts. Dogs slunk into doorways, and curtains twitched behind grimy windows as townsfolk peered out at the grim procession. Lila Monroe sat straight-backed on the driver's bench, her black widow's dress already gray with trail dust. Her hands, wrapped in torn leather gloves, gripped the reins of two exhausted horses. Behind her, beneath a canvas tarp that did little to mask the smell of death in the desert heat, lay the body of her husband, Jack Red Monroe, bank robber, cattle rustler, and killer of at least 3 men. The news had reached Bitter Creek 2 days prior. Red Monroe, shot down like a rabid dog during an ambush near Tucson. Now his widow had come to bury him, and the whole town held its breath. Sheriff Silas Boone watched from his office doorway as the wagon rolled past. At 35, he'd seen enough violence to last 2 lifetimes, but something about this woman's solitary journey with her dead husband made him uneasy. She didn't look like the typical outlaw's woman. No gaudy dress, no painted face, no defiant sneer. Just tired eyes the color of storm clouds and a mouth set in a grim line. The wagon stopped in front of the sheriff's office. Lila Monroe climbed down with careful movements, as if her body ached from the long journey. She was younger than Silas had expected, perhaps 25, with auburn hair pulled back severely beneath a black bonnet. When she turned to face him, he saw the hollows beneath her eyes and the way her dress hung loose on her frame. "Sheriff Boone?" Her voice was hoarse, whether from trail dust or grief. He couldn't tell. "That's right, ma'am." He stepped forward, hand instinctively resting on his gun belt. "I heard about your husband. Can't say I'm sorry. He was wanted in 3 territories." She didn't flinch. "I know what he was. I've come to bury him proper, that's all. There's land north of town, past the Red Rocks. I'd like your permission to lay him there." "That's town property," Silas said. "Folks here might not take kindly to having an outlaw buried so close." "Then where?" She gestured helplessly at the wagon. "I've brought him 200 miles, in this heat." She didn't finish, but they both knew what she meant. The smell was already drawing flies. Silas studied her face. No tears, no pleading, just exhaustion and a kind of resigned determination. Against his better judgment, he found himself nodding. "There's a patch of ground near the old mission, edge of town. Nobody uses it. You can bury him there." "Thank you." She turned back toward the wagon, then paused. "Is there somewhere I might stay tonight, just until it's done?" Before Silas could answer, Prudence Hartwell emerged from the general store like an avenging angel in calico, the self-appointed moral guardian of Bitter Creek. She commanded the respect and fear of most townsfolk with her sharp tongue and unforgiving nature. "Absolutely not," Prudence declared, her voice carrying across the street. Other women gathered behind her like hens protecting their coop. "We'll not have the devil's bride sleeping in our Christian town." Lila's shoulders sagged slightly, but she kept her voice level. "I have money. I can pay. Your money's as tainted as that corpse you're hauling," spat another woman, Martha Jennings, the banker's wife. "Best you bury your man and move on." Silas felt something twist in his chest at the cruelty. "Now, ladies." "Don't you ladies us, Sheriff Boone." Prudence interrupted. "You keep the peace. We'll keep the morals." This woman chose her path when she married that murderer. A crowd was gathering now. Men emerged from the saloon, drawn by the commotion. Children peered around their mothers' skirts, all eyes fixed on Lila Monroe, who stood silent beside her death wagon like a figure from a morality play. Finally, Father Miguel appeared, his brown cassock dusty from tending the mission garden. The elderly priest commanded a different kind of respect than Prudence, quieter but no less powerful. "What's this about?" he asked gently. "This woman wants to bury her outlaw husband and stay in our town," Prudence explained, managing to make both requests sound like blasphemy. Father Miguel approached Lila, studying her with kind eyes. "You've come a long way, child. Yes, Father. Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion Silas had seen. There's an old storage shed beside the mission. The priest said, "It's not much, just adobe walls and a roof. But you're welcome to it while you do what you must." Prudence's face flushed red. "Father Miguel, surely you're not—" "I'm offering Christian charity to a grieving widow," he said mildly. "Unless you'd prefer she sleep in the desert with the coyotes." The crowd murmured uneasily. Even Prudence couldn't argue against a priest's charity without appearing unchristian herself. She settled for shooting Lila a look that promised this wasn't over. "Thank you, Father," Lila said quietly. She climbed back onto the wagon and followed the priest's directions toward the mission. Silas watched her go, then turned to disperse the crowd. "Show's over, folks. Everyone back to your business." As the townspeople scattered, mumbling their disapproval, Silas found himself walking toward the mission. He told himself he was just doing his job, keeping an eye on a potentially dangerous element. But something about Lila Monroe's dignified suffering nagged at him. He found her at the edge of town, already digging in the hard earth with a shovel that looked too heavy for her thin arms. The priest had gone, leaving her alone with her grim task. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. "Need help?" Silas asked. She paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "I've buried men before. I'm sure you have." He took off his hat, ran a hand through his dark hair. "But maybe you shouldn't have to do it alone." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to gauge his motives. Then she nodded and handed him the shovel. They worked in silence as the sky darkened. Silas did most of the digging while Lila gathered rocks to line the grave. When the hole was deep enough, together they lowered Jack Monroe's wrapped body into the earth. The outlaw seemed smaller in death, just another man returning to dust. "You want to say some words?" Silas asked. Lila shook her head. He wouldn't have wanted them. She picked up a handful of dirt, let it fall through her fingers onto the shrouded form. "He lived by the gun, died by it. That's all the eulogy Jack would understand." They filled the grave as darkness fell. Coyotes howled in the distance, and a cool wind swept down from the mountains, bringing relief from the day's heat. When it was done, Lila placed a simple wooden cross at the head, no name, just 2 dates carved crudely into the wood. "Were you married long?" Silas found himself asking. 8 years. She dusted off her hands. "I was 17 when my father sold me to him to pay a gambling debt." The casual way she said it chilled him more than any curse or threat. "That's no marriage. It's the only kind I knew." She picked up her few belongings from the wagon. "Thank you for your help. Sheriff, I'll move on in the morning." "Where will you go?" She shrugged. "Somewhere they don't know my name." Silas watched her walk toward the mission, a solitary figure in black against the star-filled desert sky. He'd known many women in the territories, hardy frontier wives, saloon girls, ranchers' daughters, but Lila Monroe was something different. She carried her past like a physical weight, yet refused to bend beneath it. He returned to his office troubled. Bitter Creek was a hard town, but usually fair. Seeing how quickly the people had turned on a grieving widow, even an outlaw's widow, left a bad taste in his mouth. He'd kept the peace here for 5 years, earned the town's respect through steady judgment and a fast gun when needed. But tonight, he wondered what kind of peace he was keeping. Through his window, he could see the faint glow of a candle from the storage shed beside the mission. He imagined Lila Monroe sitting alone in that bare room, surrounded by adobe walls that still held the day's heat. No tears for her dead husband. No self-pity for her circumstances. Just that terrible dignity that seemed both admirable and heartbreaking. "Tomorrow," she'd said. She'd leave tomorrow. Silas poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and settled in for a long night of paperwork. But his thoughts kept drifting to storm-colored eyes and work-worn hands. To a woman who'd driven 200 miles through the desert to bury a man who'd likely never shown her a moment's kindness. He'd seen plenty of hard cases ride through Bitter Creek, men and women carved hollow by the frontier's brutal mathematics. But something about Lila Monroe suggested depths beneath that weathered surface, like discovering water in a canyon you'd assumed was dry. The sheriff of Bitter Creek had learned long ago not to get involved with complicated women. His job was simple: keep the peace, enforce the law, protect the town. Getting tangled up with an outlaw's widow would be nothing but trouble. Yet, as the night wore on and the candle in the mission shed finally went dark, Silas Boone found himself hoping she wouldn't leave tomorrow after all. Morning came to Bitter Creek with a vengeance, the sun already brutal by 7 o'clock. Silas Boone made his rounds earlier than usual, telling himself it had nothing to do with checking on the widow in the mission shed. But his boots seemed to have their own ideas, carrying him past the general store and down the dusty path toward the adobe church. He found Lila Monroe drawing water from the well, her black dress already damp with perspiration. She'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms marked with old bruises, some yellow, some purple-green. The sight stopped him cold. "Morning, Sheriff," she said without looking up. "Thought you'd be gone by now." She hefted the bucket with practiced ease. "Father Miguel asked if I'd help with the altar linens. Seemed the least I could do for his kindness." "The women's auxiliary won't like that. Then they're welcome to do their own washing." She started toward the church, then paused. "Unless you're here to run me out of town?" "That's not my job, ma'am. Long as you don't break the law, you're free to stay or go as you please." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise. Maybe. Or a guarded kind of hope. "Thank you." Silas watched her carry the water inside, noting how she moved with quiet efficiency, wasting no motion. A woman who'd learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible. He'd seen that kind of careful movement in abused horses and beaten dogs. The day progressed with the usual small-town rhythms. Silas broke up a fight at the saloon, collected taxes from reluctant shopkeepers, and wrote reports for the territorial judge. But throughout it all, he found himself aware of Lila Monroe's presence like a low hum in the back of his mind. Word traveled fast in Bitter Creek. By noon, everyone knew the outlaw's widow was still in town, working at the mission. Prudence Hartwell made her displeasure known to anyone who'd listen, which was most of the town. "Mark my words," she declared outside the mercantile. "That woman brings trouble. You don't live with a killer for 8 years without getting blood on your own hands." Silas was checking wanted posters when he heard the commotion. A child's scream, followed by shouts and the thunder of hooves. He ran outside to see a freight wagon careening down Main Street. The driver slumped over the reins. The horses, panicked by something, were heading straight for a group of children playing in the dust. Everything happened in seconds. Silas drew his gun, thinking to shoot one of the horses, but the angle was wrong. Too many people behind them. Then a figure in black darted from between buildings. Lila Monroe threw herself at the lead horse's bridle, using her full weight to drag its head down and aside. The wagon slewed sideways, tipping dangerously. For a moment it seemed it would crush her, but she rolled clear as it crashed into a water trough. The horses screamed and thrashed, but the danger had passed. The children scattered safely to their mothers. Silas reached the scene as Lila was calming the horses, speaking low and steady despite blood running from a gash on her forehead. The driver, old Pete Henshaw, groaned and stirred. He'd had some kind of fit, it seemed, and would live. "Let me see that cut," Silas said, reaching for Lila's face. She stepped back. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. You're bleeding. I've bled before." But she swayed slightly, and he caught her elbow. A crowd had gathered, including several of the mothers whose children had nearly been trampled. Margaret Olson, the blacksmith's wife, pushed forward with a clean kerchief. "Here," she said gruffly, pressing it to Lila's forehead. "That was brave. What you did." Prudence Hartwell arrived, slightly out of breath. Reckless is what it was. She could have gotten those children killed with her dramatics. "Prudence," Margaret said sharply. "Those were my boys in the street. This woman saved them. Prudence faltered, looking between Lila and the upset wagon. "Well, I suppose even sinners can have moments of decent behavior. Lila pulled away from Margaret's ministering hands. I should go. You should see Doc Baxter about that cut, Silas said. I can tend it myself. She retrieved the bloody kerchief and walked back toward the mission, back straight despite the obvious pain. That evening, Silas found himself at the mission again, a small medical kit in hand. Father Miguel directed him to the storage shed with a knowing smile. I didn't ask for help, Lila said when he knocked. I know. Going to let me in anyway. After a long pause, the door opened. The shed was sparse but clean, a narrow cot, a crate serving as a table, her few possessions arranged with military precision. A cracked mirror hung on one wall, and he could see where she'd tried to clean the wound herself. Sit, he ordered, pulling out antiseptic and bandages. She perched on the cot's edge while he worked, holding still as he cleaned the gash. This close, he could smell her, lye soap and desert dust and something faintly floral, like the sage that grew wild in the canyons. Why did you do it? He asked. Risk yourself for children whose mothers spit at you? They're children. It's not their fault their mothers are fools. He smiled despite himself. Prudence Hartwell would have your hide for that. Prudence Hartwell has never been hungry enough to eat pride. Lila winced as he applied the antiseptic. When you've swallowed enough of that, everything else tastes bitter by comparison. Silas secured the bandage, letting his fingers linger perhaps a moment too long against her temple. There, should heal clean if you keep it dry. Thank you. She looked up at him, those storm-gray eyes unreadable. Why are you being kind to me? Maybe I'm tired of watching this town's cruelty, or maybe you're just curious about the outlaw's widow. There was no accusation in it, just weary acceptance. They want to see the monster who could love a man like Jack Monroe. Did you love him? She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I was 17 and frightened. He was better than my father, who'd have sold me to worse men for less money. I suppose I was grateful. At first, gratitude can look like love if you squint. And later, I learned to be very good at squinting. Silas packed up his medical supplies, disturbed by the matter-of-fact pain in her voice. You could have left him. Could I? Where would I go? What would I do? I can read some, write less. I know herbs because my grandmother was Mojave and taught me before she died. I can cook, clean, mend. I can shoot. Jack made sure of that. But none of those skills mean much when you're a woman alone with no money and a husband who'd track you down and kill you for running. So you stayed. I survived. There's a difference. He stood to go, but something made him turn back. For what it's worth, I don't see a monster. What do you see? The question hung between them, charged with possibilities. Someone who drove 200 miles to bury a man who didn't deserve it. Someone who risks their life for other people's children. Someone who pays kindness forward even when the world's shown them precious little. Her breath caught, and for a moment, her careful mask slipped. He saw raw vulnerability there, quickly hidden. You should go. Sheriff, people will talk. Let them... But he left anyway, walking back through the cooling evening air with the memory of her skin under his fingers and the weight of her story in his chest. Behind him, candlelight flickered in the shed window, a solitary beacon in the gathering dark. The next morning brought the Women's Auxiliary to the mission, armed with righteous indignation and demands that Father Miguel send Lila away. Silas arrived to find them clustered like crows around the priest, who stood his ground with saintly patience. She's corrupting the sacred space, Prudence insisted. Yesterday's incident doesn't change what she is. And what is she? Father Miguel asked mildly. A criminal's wife, probably a criminal herself. Who knows what sins? I know. Lila's voice came from the church doorway. She emerged carrying a basket of freshly washed altar cloths, the white linen brilliant in the morning sun. Would you like a list? I've kept accounts. The women fell silent, torn between scandalized curiosity and moral outrage. Lila set down the basket with careful precision. I've stolen food when we were hungry. I've lied to protect myself from my husband's fists. I've wished him dead 1,000 times and felt relief when the wish came true. I've bandaged wounds he put on other men and said nothing to the law. I've looked the other way when he brought home blood money. Is that enough sin for you, Mrs. Hartwell? Or should I continue? Prudence's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. I thought not. Lila turned to Father Miguel. The linens are clean. I've also prepared the tincture you requested for Mr. Jameson's lung complaint. It's on your desk. Good day. She walked past them all, head high, leaving silence in her wake. Then Margaret Olson, the blacksmith's wife, cleared her throat. Those altar cloths do look well tended, she observed. Margaret, Prudence gasped. I'm only saying what I see, and I see a woman who saved my boys yesterday and has done nothing but work honestly since she arrived. She adjusted her shawl. Perhaps we might consider showing a bit more Christian charity. The auxiliary fractured, some siding with Prudence, others murmuring agreement with Margaret. Silas used the distraction to follow Lila, finding her at the well again, hands braced on the stone rim. That was something, he said. That was stupid. Now they'll work twice as hard to drive me out. Maybe. Or maybe you just gave some of them permission to think differently. He drew up the bucket for her. Margaret Olson's got influence. If she's willing to speak for you, why do you care? She rounded on him suddenly. What is it you want from me, Sheriff? If it's what most men want from a woman like me, just say so. I'm tired of dancing around kindness, wondering when the bill comes due. The accusation stung, but he understood it. I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something. All right then. I want you to stop looking like you're waiting for the next blow to fall. I want you to eat a meal without checking over your shoulder. I want you to smile, just once, like you mean it. He stepped closer, voice dropping. I want you to believe that not every kindness has a price. She stared at him, eyes wide. You're a fool. Silas Boone. Probably. I'll only bring you trouble. I'm the sheriff. Trouble's my business. She almost smiled then, just a slight quirk of her lips, but it transformed her face. For an instant. He glimpsed the girl she might have been before life ground her down. Don't say I didn't warn you, she murmured, and took the bucket from his hands. As she walked back to the church, Silas noticed more than one townsperson watching her, some with suspicion still, but others with something like curiosity or even sympathy. The tide wasn't turning yet, but perhaps it was beginning to shift. That night, he lay awake thinking about bruises and bravery, about the price of survival and the cost of kindness in a hard world. Outside, coyotes sang to the stars, and somewhere in an adobe shed, a woman who'd forgotten how to hope was learning, perhaps, to squint a little less. The sickness came to Bitter Creek on a Tuesday morning, riding in on the wind like an invisible stampede. First it was just old Jameson, coughing worse than usual at the general store. Then Mrs. Peterson took to her bed with fever. By Wednesday afternoon, Father Miguel had collapsed while saying Mass, and panic began to spread faster than the disease itself. Silas stood in Doc Baxter's cramped office, watching the elderly physician shake his head over his medical texts. Could be typhoid, Doc muttered. The well water, maybe. Or something in the air. I've seen these fevers sweep through towns before. They take the weak first, then spread like wildfire. What do? Isolate the sick. Boil all water. Pray. Doc's hands trembled as he mixed a tonic. I'll do what I can, but I'm only one man, and I'm not as young as I used to be. By Thursday, a quarter of the town was ill. The mission had become a makeshift hospital, with Father Miguel among the patients. Prudence Hartwell, despite her moralizing, was one of the first to fall sick, followed by several members of the Women's Auxiliary. Doc Baxter worked himself to exhaustion, and Silas organized the healthy men to maintain order and dig graves. Too many graves. It was then that Lila Monroe emerged from her shed with a basket of herbs and a determined expression. What are you doing? Silas asked as she headed for the mission. What needs doing? She brushed past him. I told you I know healing plants. My grandmother taught me. The townspeople won't accept help from you. The townspeople are dying. She turned to face him, eyes blazing. They can hate me when they're well again. She swept into the mission like a force of nature. Doc Baxter, swaying on his feet, started to protest, but she was already examining patients, checking tongues and temperatures with practiced efficiency. "This isn't typhoid," she announced. "See the rash pattern? The way the fever spikes and falls? I've seen this before. There's a contaminated water source. Yes, but it's carrying something else, probably from upstream where those miners dumped their quicksilver waste last month." "You can't know that," Doc Baxter said weakly. "I can, and I do." She began pulling herbs from her basket. "Yarrow for the fever, willow bark for pain, golden seal to fight the poison, and this," she held up a gnarled root, "desert sage. The Mojave use it to draw out toxins." Doc Baxter examined the herbs with growing interest. "These could work." "The proportions?" Lila rattled off measurements with the confidence of someone who'd mixed these remedies 100 times. Soon they were working side by side, preparing tinctures and teas. Silas found himself conscripted as an assistant, carrying water, administering medicines, and holding down delirious patients. The first night was hellish. The mission echoed with groans and prayers. 2 more people died, the baker's young son and an elderly widow. Lila moved between patients like a ghost, her black dress making her almost invisible in the candlelight, except for her pale hands and face. Silas caught her during a brief respite, pressing a cup of coffee into her hands. "When did you last eat? Yesterday? Maybe?" She swayed slightly. "Doesn't matter." "It does matter." He steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "You can't help them if you collapse." She looked up at him, exhaustion making her defenses crumble. "They're dying because of fear and stupidity. If someone had noticed the water problem sooner, if the miners had been stopped." Her voice broke. "That little boy, he was the same age as—" She stopped abruptly. "As who?" "No one. Nothing." She pulled away, armor sliding back into place. "I should check on Mrs. Hartwell." But Silas filed the moment away. Another piece of the puzzle that was Lila Monroe. By the second day, the remedies were showing effect. Fevers broke, the delirium eased. Patients who'd been at death's door began asking for water, for food. Doc Baxter stared at Lila with something approaching awe. 40 years I've been practicing medicine," he said. "Never seen anything work so fast. Western medicine forgets that people have been healing each other for thousands of years without your textbooks." Lila replied, but not unkindly. "Sometimes the old ways are best." Word spread through the town like the sickness had. But this was different. The outlaw's widow was saving lives. Children she'd never met. Women who'd spat at her. Men who'd cursed her presence. She treated them all with the same quiet competence. Margaret Olson, recovered enough to sit up, caught Lila's hand as she passed. "Thank you," she whispered. Lila nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Rest now." Even Prudence Hartwell, weak but lucid, watched Lila work with something like confusion. "Why?" she asked when Lila brought her medicine. "Why help us after how we treated you?" "Because I can," Lila said simply. "Drink this. It's bitter, but it'll help." On the 3rd day, Silas found Lila sitting outside the mission, face turned up to the dawn sky. She looked exhausted but somehow lighter, as if saving lives had eased some invisible burden. "We did it," he said, sitting beside her on the wooden bench. "They did it. They chose to live." She rubbed her eyes. "Though I could sleep for a week." "You should. Doc Baxter can handle things now." "In a bit." She leaned back, and without seeming to realize it, let her shoulder rest against his. "It's peaceful now. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of rose and gold. Inside the mission, patients were stirring, voices calling for water, for food, the sounds of life returning. "You saved them," Silas said quietly. I did what anyone with knowledge would do. No. He turned to look at her. Most people would have let them suffer, would have called it justice or God's will. You could have walked away, gone to another town. Instead, you saved the very people who wanted you gone. She met his gaze, something vulnerable in her expression. My grandmother used to say that healing was the only way to balance the ledger. For every life taken, try to save two. For every cruelty, offer twice the kindness. A sad smile touched her lips. I have a lot of balancing to do, not for sins that weren't yours. Weren't they? I stayed with him. I enabled him by my silence. You survived. Silas said firmly, That's not a sin. She studied him for a long moment, then looked away. You're a strange man. Silas Boone, most lawmen I've known see the world in black and white. Maybe I've learned there's a lot of gray between those extremes. Gray, she repeated softly. Yes, I suppose there is. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then footsteps approached, and they moved apart. Doc Baxter emerged, looking haggard but smiling. The crisis has passed, he announced. A few more days of care, and most everyone should recover fully. He looked at Lila with genuine warmth. I owe you an apology. Mrs. Monroe, and more than that, the whole town owes you a debt. She stood, brushing off her skirts. They owe me nothing. I should check the medicine supplies. As she walked away, Doc Baxter shook his head. Remarkable woman. To think I almost refused her help. People surprise you sometimes. Silas agreed, his eyes following her retreating figure. Indeed they do. Doc studied him shrewdly. You be careful. Sheriff, that kind of woman, she could make a man forget himself. Maybe forgetting isn't always bad. Doc grunted. Just remember, she's got ghosts, and ghosts have a way of coming back to haunt the living. But Silas was already walking after her, drawn like a compass needle to true north. He found her in the mission, carefully measuring herbs with hands that had finally begun to tremble. Reaction setting in after 3 days of constant work. Let me help, he said, taking the mortar and pestle from her shaking fingers. I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to, not anymore. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or the first tentative bridge across the chasm of their different worlds. Outside, Bitter Creek was waking to a new day. The sickness had passed, leaving the town cleaner somehow, purged of more than just disease. And, in the mission, working side by side in the morning light, a sheriff and an outlaw's widow began to discover that sometimes the most unexpected people could offer exactly the healing you didn't know you needed. The town's gratitude lasted exactly 1 week. As Bitter Creek returned to health, old suspicions crept back like shadows at dusk. Whispers started in the saloon, spread through the mercantile, and took root in the church pews. The outlaw's widow had saved them. Yes, but what did that prove except that she knew dark arts? Perhaps she'd caused the sickness herself, just to play savior. Silas heard the rumors and felt his jaw tighten. He'd watched Lila work herself to exhaustion, saving people who despised her. Now those same people were twisting her kindness into something sinister. Human nature, Doc Baxter said when Silas voiced his frustration. Fear's a powerful thing. Easier to suspect witchcraft than admit they were wrong about her. The breaking point came on a Sunday after church. Lila had taken to sitting in the back pew, head bowed, hands folded. Most of the congregation ignored her, but their silence spoke volumes. As people filed out, Prudence Hartwell, fully recovered and righteous as ever, blocked Lila's path. We need to talk, Prudence announced, flanked by her usual supporters, about your continued presence in our town. Lila stood slowly, meeting Prudence's gaze with tired resignation. What is it now, Mrs. Hartwell? People are talking about you and the sheriff. Prudence's eyes glittered with malicious triumph. It's unseemly, carrying on with a woman of your background. Carrying on. Lila's voice was dangerously quiet. I've spoken to Sheriff Boone perhaps a dozen times, always in public, always about town business. Nevertheless, your presence is a corrupting influence. You've decided nothing. Silas stepped from the shadows where he'd been listening. Mrs. Monroe is a free citizen who's broken no laws. In fact, she saved half this town, including you, Prudence. Prudence flushed. That doesn't give her the right to— To what? Exist? Breathe your air? Sit in God's house? His voice hardened. I'd think carefully about your next words. Mrs. Hartwell, judge not, lest ye be judged. Isn't that what the good book says? The crowd shuffled nervously. Challenging Prudence was one thing. Invoking scripture against her was another. She sputtered, searching for a comeback. But Margaret Olson stepped forward. The sheriff's right, Margaret said firmly. This woman saved my children twice over. If that's not Christian behavior, I don't know what is. The crowd split, some nodding agreement, others maintaining stony disapproval. Father Miguel, still weak but upright, raised a peaceful hand. Perhaps we should all reflect on the parable of the Good Samaritan, he suggested mildly. Now, I believe Sunday dinner awaits. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Silas and Lila standing in the dusty churchyard. She looked at him with an unreadable expression. You shouldn't have done that, she said. Now they'll talk about you too. Let them talk. He fell into step beside her as she walked toward the mission. I'm tired of their hypocrisy. You have to live here, work here. These people elect you. Then maybe they need a different sheriff. She stopped abruptly. Don't throw away everything you've built for whatever this is. What is this, Lila? The question hung between them like a challenge. She looked away, toward the red rocks that bordered the town. I don't know. I can't afford to know. Because of Jack? Because of me. She faced him again, eyes bright with unshed tears. I've been someone's property since I was 17. I don't know how to be anything else. And you're a good man. Silas Boone, you deserve better than damaged goods. You're not goods. You're not property. You're a woman who's survived hell and still finds it in herself to heal others. He stepped closer, voice dropping. And I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Strong? I'm scared all the time. Scared of shadows, of raised voices, of kindness most of all. Because kindness makes me hope. And hope is dangerous for someone like me. Then be dangerous, he said softly. Take the risk. For a moment, she swayed toward him like a flower seeking sun. Then she stepped back, armor sliding into place. I should go. The altar linens need tending. Silas let her go, but made a decision. The next morning, he saddled 2 horses and knocked on her door. What's this? She asked, eyeing the horses warily. You've been in this town for 3 weeks and haven't seen anything but dusty streets and sick beds. There's a place I want to show you. I have work. Father Miguel gave his blessing. Says you need a day of rest. He held out his hand. Trust me? She stared at his extended hand like it might bite. Then, slowly, she placed her fingers in his. All right. They rode west as the morning sun climbed, following a trail that wound between towering red rocks and stands of juniper. Lila handled her mount well. Jack had taught her that much. At least. As the town fell away behind them, Silas watched tension slowly leave her shoulders. Where are we going? She asked after an hour of comfortable silence. Hidden Falls. Most folks don't know about it. Apache showed it to me years back when I helped his son out of a scrape. The trail narrowed, becoming a canyon that suddenly opened into a green oasis. Water cascaded down red rock into a clear pool surrounded by cottonwoods and wildflowers. In the desert, such places were miracles. Lila's breath caught. It's beautiful. They dismounted, letting the horses drink. Silas spread a blanket on a flat rock and unpacked the lunch he'd brought. Cold chicken, bread, apples, and a jar of Mrs. Chen's peach preserves. "This is too much," Lila protested even as she accepted a plate. "It's lunch, not a marriage proposal." He meant it lightly, but she flushed and looked away. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the water and the wind in the cottonwoods. Gradually, Lila relaxed, even removing her bonnet to let the breeze play with her hair. In the dappled sunlight, she looked younger, softer, a glimpse of who she might have been. "Tell me about your grandmother," Silas said eventually. Lila smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. She was magnificent, tiny as a bird but fierce as a she-wolf. The Mojave called her woman who speaks to plants. She knew every herb, every remedy, taught me from the time I could walk. What happened to her? Died when I was 15. Fever took her. Ironic, all her medicine couldn't save her in the end. The smile faded. Father sold me 2 years later. Said a half-breed orphan was too much trouble to keep. Your mother died birthing me. Father never let me forget it. She picked up a pebble, threw it into the pool. What about you? How does a man become sheriff of a town like Bitter Creek? So he told her about growing up on a failing ranch, losing his parents to cholera, drifting from town to town until he found a place that needed law and order. How he'd fast drawn his way into the job and tried to use it to build something better. You're an idealist, she observed. Guilty, though the world does its best to beat it out of me. The world's good at that. She leaned back on her hands, face tipped toward the sun. This place, though, it's like another world entirely. That's why I come here, to remember there's beauty worth protecting. She turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. Is that what you're doing with me? Protecting beauty? Maybe I'm protecting myself. From what? From becoming the kind of man who sees the world in black and white, from forgetting that people are complicated, that redemption is possible, that... He stopped, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. That what? Her voice was barely above a whisper. That sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. The air between them crackled with possibility. Lila's lips parted, her breathing shallow. Then a gunshot echoed through the canyon, shattering the moment. They were on their feet instantly. Silas's hand on his Colt. 3 riders emerged from the canyon mouth, rough men with hard faces and worse intentions. Well, well, the leader drawled. Sheriff Boone and the widow Monroe. How cozy. Silas recognized them, Carter boys, small-time rustlers and troublemakers. This is a bad idea. Tom, turn around and ride out. Tom Carter laughed. Don't think so, Sheriff. See, we heard Jack Monroe's widow might know where he stashed his take from that last job. Figured we'd ask polite-like. I don't know anything about Jack's money, Lila said steadily. Maybe you need help remembering. Tom's eyes traveled over her in a way that made Silas see red. We could be real helpful. Over my dead body. Silas growled. That can be arranged? Tom's hand moved toward his gun. What happened next took seconds. Tom drew, fast but not fast enough. Silas's Colt roared, and Tom spun backward, clutching his shoulder. The second brother went for his rifle, but Lila, quiet, frightened Lila, had pulled a derringer from somewhere and put a bullet in his leg. The third brother, seeing the odds, threw up his hands. We're done! We're done! Silas kept his gun trained on them. Get your brothers and get out. If I see any of you near Mrs. Monroe again, you'll be measuring plots in Boot Hill. They retreated, hauling their wounded away. Only when the hoofbeats faded did Silas lower his weapon and turn to Lila. She stood frozen, the small gun still in her hand, staring at the blood on the rocks. Hey. He gently took the derringer from her trembling fingers. It's over. I shot him, she whispered. Just like Jack taught me. Didn't even think, just, you defended yourself, that's all. Is it? She looked up at him, eyes haunted. Or am I just what everyone thinks, an outlaw's woman, through and through? You're a survivor, he said firmly. And I'm damn glad you are. Something broke in her then. She collapsed against his chest, not crying but shaking like a leaf in a storm. He held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring nonsense comfort words. Gradually, the trembling eased. "We should go," she said against his shirt. "They might come back." In a minute, he pulled back enough to see her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Lila." She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was nothing like he'd imagined. No gentle, tentative meeting of lips. This was desperate, hungry. 8 years of loneliness and fear pouring out in a single moment. She kissed like she was drowning and he was air, like she was trying to prove she was alive. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she pressed her forehead to his. "I shouldn't have done that." "Why?" "Because now I know what I'm losing when I leave." "Then don't leave." "Silas." "I mean it." He cupped her face in his hands. "Stay. Let me court you proper. Let the town gossip. I don't care. Just stay." She searched his eyes for a long moment. "All right," she whispered. "For now." They rode back to town as the sun set, hands occasionally brushing, both aware that something fundamental had shifted. The pool of water in the hidden canyon had washed away more than trail dust. It had dissolved the careful walls between them. But as Bitter Creek came into view, Lila's shoulders tensed again. The real world waited there, with its judgment and complications. And somewhere in the growing shadows, the Carter boys nursed their wounds and their grudges, planning revenge. The rain came that night like a biblical flood, turning Bitter Creek's dusty streets into rivers of mud. Lila sat in her shed listening to the drops hammer the roof, unable to sleep. The kiss at Hidden Falls played over and over in her mind. Silas's hands gentle on her face, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of damaged. She'd told him she would stay. But now, in the darkness, fear crept back. The Carter boys would return. The town would never fully accept her. And Silas, good, decent Silas, would eventually see her for what she truly was. A woman so broken she didn't know how to be whole. Her decision made, she began to pack. It didn't take long. 8 years of marriage to Jack had taught her to travel light. As she folded her few dresses, her fingers found the derringer tucked in her skirts. Such a small thing to carry such weight. She'd shot a man today without hesitation, proved she was exactly what everyone believed. Thunder crashed overhead as she slipped out into the storm. The rain soaked through her cloak immediately, but she welcomed the cold. It matched the numbness spreading through her chest. She'd leave the horse. It wasn't hers anyway. She'd walk to the stage depot and catch the dawn coach to anywhere but here. She made it 3 miles before they found her. The Carter boys emerged from the darkness like demons, water streaming from their hat brims. Tom's arm was in a sling. His brother Billy limped from his leg wound, but their eyes burned with violent purpose. "Leaving so soon, widow?" Tom sneered. Without saying goodbye, Lila's hand moved toward the derringer, but Billy was faster. Knocking her into the mud, the small gun went flying. Lost in the darkness, she tried to scream, but Tom's hand covered her mouth. "You cost us today," he hissed. "Time to pay up." They dragged her off the road into a grove of cottonwoods. Lightning illuminated their faces in horrible flashes, twisted with rage and something worse. Lila fought with the desperate strength of a woman who'd survived 8 years of brutality. But there were 3 of them. Tom struck her across the face, splitting her lip. "Hold her down," he ordered his brothers. "Let's see what Jack Monroe thought was worth keeping." Terror gave her strength. She twisted, managing to drive her knee into Billy's wounded leg. He howled and loosened his grip. She lunged for Tom's gun, fingers closing on the handle just as he backhanded her again. Stars exploded across her vision. "Stupid woman," Tom snarled, pinning her wrist. "Should have just told us where the money is." "There is no money," she gasped. "Jack spent it all." Another blow silenced her. Through the rain and pain, she heard the sound of tearing fabric. This was how it would end. Then, not a clean death, but this ugliness, this final degradation. She closed her eyes, trying to go somewhere else in her mind, the way she'd learned to during Jack's worst moments. Then gunfire split the night. Tom jerked back, clutching his side. Billy spun around to face the darkness. Who's there? The man who's going to kill you slow if you don't step away from her. Silas emerged from the storm like an avenging angel, water streaming from his duster, Colt steady in his hand. Sheriff, Tom wheezed. This ain't your business. Everything in this town is my business, especially her. His voice was ice-cold fury. Move away, now. The third brother, silent until now, made a fatal mistake. He went for his gun. Silas put 2 bullets in his chest before the man's weapon cleared leather. The body hit the mud with a wet thud. Jesus, Billy breathed. You killed him. You killed Davy. And I'll kill you both if you don't drop your weapons and step back. They complied, moving away from Lila. She struggled to sit up, holding her torn dress closed, blood running from her split lip. Silas never took his eyes off the brothers, but his voice gentled. Can you stand? Yes. She managed to get to her feet, swaying slightly. Good. Come here. Stay behind me. She stumbled to him, pressing against his back, feeling the controlled fury radiating from him like heat. The rain continued to pour, washing blood into the earth. Here's what's going to happen, Silas told the surviving brothers. You're going to pick up Davy and ride out. Tonight, if I see either of you in the territory again, I'll kill you on sight. No trial, no mercy, just bullets. You can't do that, Tom protested. You're the law. I am the law. And the law says men who attack women in the night forfeit their right to justice. He cocked the Colt. You have 10 seconds to decide. Leave or die. They chose to leave, loading their dead brother onto his horse and disappearing into the storm. Only when the hoofbeats faded did Silas lower his weapon and turn to Lila. Let me see, he said softly, tilting her face toward the lightning flashes. His jaw tightened at the bruises already forming. I'll kill them. I'll hunt them down and— No, she caught his hand. No more killing. Please. They hurt you. His voice broke. I saw your empty shed, saw the storm, and I knew, God, Lila, if I'd been 5 minutes later. But you weren't. She was shaking now, reaction setting in. How did you find me? I know you. Knew you'd run rather than risk bringing me trouble. Knew you'd take the north road because it's the fastest way to the stage depot. He shrugged out of his duster, wrapping it around her. Come on, let's get you warm. His house was closer than town. He half carried her there, kicking open the door and setting her by the fire. She huddled in his coat while he built up the flames and heated water. Neither spoke as he cleaned her cuts with gentle hands, the intimacy both necessary and terrifying. This is what I bring, she whispered finally. Violence, pain. Men like the Carters, drawn by what they think I know or have. This is what they bring. He corrected. Their choice, their evil. But I'm the catalyst. You're the woman I love. The words hung in the air like thunder. Lila's breath caught. You don't mean that. I do. He knelt before her, taking her hands. I've been falling since the day you drove into town with more dignity than this whole place combined. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see strength that humbles me, compassion that shouldn't exist after what you've endured, beauty that has nothing to do with your face and everything to do with your soul. Silas. Tears ran down her cheeks, mixing with rain and blood. I don't know how to be loved. Not the real way, not the clean way. Then I'll teach you, however long it takes. He brought her hands to his lips. Just don't leave. Please, Lila. Don't leave. She broke then, sobbing as 8 years of walls crumbled. He gathered her close, rocking her like a child while the storm raged outside. She cried for the girl sold at 17, for the woman who'd learned to endure instead of live, for all the tenderness she'd been denied and forgotten how to accept. When the tears finally stopped, she found herself curled in his lap before the fire. I must look terrible, she murmured. You look alive. That's all that matters. He pressed his lips to her hair. Stay tonight. Just sleep. I'll keep watch. I can't. People will— To hell with people. But he gentled the words with a smile. Mrs. Chen is visiting her sister. No one will know. And even if they did, your safety matters more than their gossip. Too exhausted to argue, she let him lead her to his bed. He tucked her in like something precious, then pulled a chair near the door, rifle across his knees. "Sleep," he said. "I won't let anything hurt you again." For the first time in 8 years. Lila Monroe fell asleep feeling safe. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. Her body ached, her face throbbed, but she was alive. More than that, she felt a strange lightness, as if crying had washed away some poison she'd carried too long. Silas sat by the window, looking haggard but alert. He smiled when he saw her awake. "Morning. You stayed up all night. Worth it to see you sleep peaceful." He brought her coffee and some bread with jam. "How do you feel?" "Sore, but—" She searched for words. "Different, like something's shifted." "Maybe it has." He sat on the bed's edge, careful not to crowd her. "Lila, what I said last night, did you mean it?" "Every word." She set aside the coffee and took his hand. "Then ask me." "Ask you what? What you wanted to ask at Hidden Falls before the Carters interrupted." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He slid from the bed to one knee, her hand still clasped in his. "Lila Monroe, will you let me court you? Will you give me the chance to show you how a real man treats the woman he loves? And if I'm too broken, if I can't, then we'll be broken together and make something new from the pieces." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "Say yes. Lila, choose hope. Just this once." She thought of the darkness she'd walked in for so long, the walls she'd built for protection that had become a prison. Thought of this good man who'd killed for her, kept vigil over her sleep, offered her something she'd never dared dream of. "Yes," she whispered. His smile was like sunrise after the storm. He pressed her hand to his lips, then his cheek, holding it there as if she might disappear. "Thank you. I should be thanking you." "No." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "We're done with gratitude as currency. From now on, it's just you and me, figuring out how to build something neither of us has had before. A real home. A real home. A real life. A real love." He cupped her bruised face with infinite tenderness. "If you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, she kissed him. Not with yesterday's desperation, but with something softer, sweeter, hope taking its first tentative breath. When they parted, both were trembling. "I should get you back to town," he said roughly. "Before I forget, I'm a gentleman." "What if I don't want you to be a gentleman?" He groaned, resting his forehead against hers. "Woman, you'll be the death of me." "No," she said seriously. "I think we'll be life to each other." They returned to town to find it in an uproar. The Carter boys had been found dead on the road, Tom and Billy shot, apparently by their own men in a dispute over money. Their passing was unmourned. Their threat ended. If anyone noticed Lila's bruised face or the protective way Silas stayed close to her, they kept their thoughts private. That evening, as she tended the altar linens with hands that no longer shook, Lila felt the weight of the past 8 years beginning to lift. She was still Jack Monroe's widow, still marked by her history. But she was also becoming something new, a woman who'd chosen hope over fear, love over mere survival. Outside, she could hear Silas making his rounds, his steady footsteps a promise of protection and presence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new gossip, new tests of their fragile connection. But tonight, she was safe. Tonight, she was chosen. Tonight, she was finally, tentatively, free. The federal marshal arrived on a Tuesday. 3 weeks after the Carter boys died, he rode in on a black stallion, badge glinting in the afternoon sun, and headed straight for the sheriff's office. Silas saw him coming through the window and felt his gut tighten. Federal marshals meant federal business, and federal business usually meant trouble. "Sheriff Boone." The man was tall, lean, with the kind of face that had seen too much and forgotten how to smile. "Marshal Wade Garrison. We need to talk about Jack Monroe." Silas kept his expression neutral. Monroe's been dead near 2 months now. I'm aware. It's what he left behind that interests me. Garrison pulled out a wanted poster, not for Jack, but for 3 men who'd robbed a Wells Fargo shipment 6 months prior. These men were Monroe's partners. They're dead now. Killed each other over the split. But the money's still missing. $20,000 in gold certificates. What's that got to do with Bitter Creek? Monroe's widow lives here, doesn't she? Garrison's pale eyes were sharp as glass. Find it interesting she shows up right after her husband dies, settles in nice and cozy, and makes a man wonder what she might be sitting on. Mrs. Monroe arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back and her husband's body. So she says. But women like that, they know how to hide things, how to play innocent while sitting on a fortune. Garrison leaned back in his chair. I'll need to question her. Thoroughly. Silas's hands clenched under the desk. She doesn't know anything about Monroe's crimes? That's for me to determine. The marshal's smile was thin as a blade. You seem mighty protective of this woman. Sheriff, hope that's not clouding your judgment. My judgment's clear. Mrs. Monroe is a law-abiding citizen who's done nothing but good in this town. Law-abiding citizens don't usually marry bank robbers. Garrison stood, adjusting his gun belt. Where can I find her? She works at the mission, but nothing. I've got a job to do. Sheriff, you can either help or get out of my way. Which will it be? Silas stood as well, matching the marshal's hard stare. I'll take you to her, but you'll treat her with respect, or we'll have problems. Is that a threat? It's a promise. They found Lila in the mission garden, teaching some of the town children about medicinal herbs. She looked up as they approached, and Silas saw the exact moment she recognized what Garrison was. Her face went pale, but she kept her voice steady as she sent the children home. Mrs. Monroe, Garrison said, touching his hat brim in mock courtesy. I'm Marshal Garrison. I need to ask you some questions about your late husband's business affairs. I don't know anything about Jack's business. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirts. That's what they all say. He circled her like a wolf stalking prey. Funny thing about outlaw widows, they always claim ignorance, right up until we find the money hidden under their petticoats. Color flooded Lila's cheeks. Search me if you must. You'll find nothing but patches and darning. Maybe I will. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made Silas step forward. That's enough, Silas said. Ask your questions, but keep it civil. Garrison's smile widened. Oh, I see how it is. The good sheriff's been sampling the outlaw's leftovers. Tell me, Boone, does she earn her keep on her back? Silas's fist connected with Garrison's jaw before the words finished leaving his mouth. The marshal stumbled back, hand going to his gun, but Silas already had his Colt drawn. Pull it, Silas said quietly. Give me a reason. You just assaulted a federal officer. I just defended a lady's honor. There's a difference. Silas kept the gun steady. Now, you can ask your questions respectful-like, or you can ride out. Choose. Garrison wiped blood from his mouth, eyes burning with fury. This isn't over. Boone, I'll have your badge for this. You can try. Silas holstered his weapon. But right now, you're disrupting the peace in my town. Move along. The marshal left, but not before shooting Lila a look that promised retribution. When he was gone, she sank onto a garden bench, shaking. He'll be back, she said. With warrants, with men. He'll tear this town apart looking for money that doesn't exist. Let him try. Silas sat beside her, taking her hand. I won't let him hurt you. You hit a federal marshal for me. Wonder and fear warred in her voice. Silas, you could lose everything. Already told you, without you, everything means nothing. He squeezed her fingers. But we need to be smart. Is there anything at all, that Jack might have hidden? Any chance Garrison's right about the money? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's a letter. What? Jack gave me a letter the night before he left on that last job. Said if anything happened to him, I should burn it, but I kept it. hidden in the lining of my traveling case. Why didn't you burn it? She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes. Because I was afraid. Because I thought maybe there was something in it I could use to buy my freedom. Because I'm not the good woman you think I am. Show me. They went to her shed, where she carefully slit the lining of her battered case and withdrew a sealed envelope. Inside was a single page in Jack's crude handwriting. Lila, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Good. Now you're free. The law will come sniffing around about the Wells Fargo job. But you don't know nothing because there's nothing to know. The gold's gone, spent on bad whiskey and worse women. Tell them to dig up my corpse if they want their money back. It'll do them as much good. Don't mourn me. I wasn't worth it. Jack. He spent it all, Lila said wonderingly. $20,000. And he spent every cent. This letter proves you're innocent. Does it? Or does it prove I knew about the robbery? She rubbed her temples. Garrison won't care about truth. He needs someone to blame. She was right. The next morning, Garrison returned with 2 deputies and a warrant. They tore through Lila's few possessions, dumped out her herbs, even pried up floorboards. They found nothing, which only made Garrison angrier. You're coming with me, he told Lila. We'll continue this conversation in Tucson. On what charges? Silas demanded. Suspicion of conspiracy, possession of stolen goods, whatever I need to hold her until she talks. I'll come willingly, Lila said quietly. I have nothing to hide. No, Silas stepped between them. You're not taking her anywhere without evidence. Stand aside, Sheriff, or I'll arrest you too. The standoff might have turned violent, but Father Miguel chose that moment to appear with half the town behind him. Margaret Olson, Doc Baxter, even some who'd initially shunned Lila. They all crowded into the small shed. What's going on here? Father Miguel asked mildly. Federal business. Padre. Nothing to concern you. Everything in my mission concerns me. The priest's voice remained gentle, but steel lurked beneath. Mrs. Monroe is under the sanctuary of the church. To remove her, you'll need more than suspicion. Sanctuary? Garrison laughed. This isn't medieval Europe. No, but this is my mission. On church land deeded by Spanish grant. And I say she stays. Father Miguel smiled benignly. Of course, you're welcome to take it up with the bishop in Santa Fe. I'm sure he'd be fascinated to hear how federal marshals are violating ecclesiastical sovereignty. Garrison's face went red. The legal grounds were shaky. But challenging the Catholic Church in the territories was political suicide. This is obstruction. This is Christianity, Margaret Olson said, stepping forward. Something you might try sometime. More townspeople pushed in, forming a protective wall around Lila. Garrison's hand twitched toward his gun, but even he wasn't foolish enough to draw on unarmed citizens in a church. Fine, he snarled. But this isn't over. I'll be back with proper warrants. More men, and when I am, not even God himself will stop me from taking her. He stormed out, deputies trailing behind. The crowd slowly dispersed, many pausing to pat Lila's shoulder or murmur support. When they were alone with Father Miguel, she broke down crying. Thank you, she sobbed. I don't deserve. Child, the priest said gently. Grace isn't about deserving, it's about receiving. He looked at Silas. You know he'll make good on his threat. I know. Silas pulled Lila close. We need to find proof of her innocence. Real proof. The letter, Lila began, won't be enough. We need witnesses, documents, something that puts you nowhere near Jack's crimes. I know someone who might help. Doc Baxter said from the doorway. Old Sam Briggs lives out past Crystal Canyon. He used to ride with Monroe years back, before his conscience got the better of him. If anyone knows the truth about that robbery, it'd be him. Will he talk? To save an innocent woman? Maybe, especially if that woman saved half this town from typhoid. Doc smiled at Lila. Sam's got a daughter in Bitter Creek. You saved her life during the outbreak. Hope flickered in Lila's eyes. It's worth trying. I'll ride out tomorrow, Silas said. We'll ride out, Lila corrected. This is my fight too. Garrison's watching? Then we'll leave before dawn." Her jaw set in that stubborn line he'd come to love. "I'm done letting others fight my battles." That night, Silas found her in the mission chapel, a single candle flickering before her as she sat in silence. He slid into the pew beside her, praying. It's been so long, I've forgotten how. She leaned against his shoulder. "Do you think God listens to women like me? I think God listens to anyone brave enough to hope." He pressed his lips to her hair. "And if he doesn't, I'll have words with him about his priorities." She laughed. A watery sound, but real. "Blasphemy. Sheriff Boone. Honesty, Mrs. Monroe." He turned her to face him. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever we find or don't find, I want you to know something. You've already saved me." "Silas?" "No, let me finish. I was dying inside before you came, going through the motions, keeping the peace but feeling nothing. You woke me up, made me remember why I became a lawman in the first place, to protect people who need protecting, to stand for something more than just order." He cradled her face. "So even if Garrison takes you, even if we lose everything, I'm grateful for knowing you, for loving you, for this." She kissed him then, in the chapel with God as witness, pouring all her fear and hope and newfound faith into the connection between them. When they parted, both were crying. "We're going to win," she whispered. "Somehow. We're going to win. How do you know?" "Because for the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for." She smiled through her tears. "And so do you." They sat together until the candle burned low. Two souls finding sanctuary not just in the church, but in each other. Tomorrow would bring danger, possibly defeat, but tonight they had this. Love sanctified by struggle. Hope born from ashes. And the beginning of a faith that even federal marshals couldn't destroy. The ride to Crystal Canyon took most of the day, through terrain that shifted from red rock to scrub pine and back again. They'd slipped out of Bitter Creek before dawn. Lila, dressed in men's clothing borrowed from Father Miguel's charity box, her hair tucked under a worn hat. From a distance, she could pass for a young ranch hand riding alongside the sheriff. Sam Briggs lived in a cabin that looked ready to collapse at the next strong wind. The old outlaw turned hermit greeted them with a shotgun and suspicious eyes that widened when he recognized Lila. "Jack's woman," he said, lowering the gun. "Heard you was in Bitter Creek. I need your help, Mr. Briggs." Lila dismounted, pulling off the hat to let her hair fall free. "The federal marshal thinks I know where Jack hid money from the Wells Fargo job." "Do you?" "No, but you might." Sam studied her for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Silas. "You the sheriff who's sweet on her?" "I'm the sheriff who's trying to keep an innocent woman from hanging," Silas replied evenly. "Same thing, from what I hear." Sam spat tobacco juice. "Come inside. This ain't talk for open air." The cabin's interior was surprisingly neat, with books stacked on rough shelves and a pot of stew simmering on the stove. Sam poured coffee without asking if they wanted any. Jack Monroe was a fool. He began without preamble. Good with a gun, bad with everything else. That Wells Fargo job was doomed from the start. "You were part of it?" Silas asked. "Was supposed to be, backed out when I saw how stupid the plan was." Sam looked at Lila. "That was 2 weeks before your husband died, wasn't it? The job that went wrong?" "Yes, he came home shot, fevered, died 3 days later. Because he was greedy. The take was supposed to be split 4 ways. Jack, the Colson brothers, and me, if I'd gone along. But Jack got ideas, shot the Colsons during the getaway, took all the gold himself. Where is it?" Silas leaned forward. Sam laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Where do you think? Jack Monroe never saved a penny in his life. Man had holes in his pockets and devils in his blood. He lost half that gold in a poker game in Nogales the very next night. Spent the rest on whiskey, women, and a fancy saddle with silver conchos." "You're certain?" "Certain as sunrise. I was in that poker game. Watched him lose hand after hand, throwing good money after bad. By the time he rode north, he had nothing left but that saddle and a bullet in his gut from the Colson's cousin." Sam turned to Lila. He'd tell you he was dying when he got home. He was fevered, rambling, but I didn't know about the bullet until after. Man was too proud to admit he'd been shot by someone he thought he'd killed. Probably figured he'd heal up. Rob another bank. Sam shook his head. Instead, he bled out slow. All that stolen gold already gone. Would you testify to this? Silas asked. Tell the marshal what you've told us. Fear flickered in Sam's eyes. Testifying means admitting I was part of planning that robbery. You backed out, never took any money. And statute of limitations on conspiracy is 5 years. You'd be clear in a few months anyway. It also means making enemies of every outlaw in the territory. Man who turns witness doesn't live long out here. Please, Lila said quietly. My daughter needs to know her mother wasn't a thief. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Sam's eyes sharpened, and Silas turned to stare at her. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Daughter? Silas's voice was carefully neutral. Lila closed her eyes. She died 3 years ago. Fever. She opened them again, meeting his gaze. I was going to tell you. I just hadn't found the words yet. Jax? Yes. The admission tasted like ashes. Her name was Clara. She had my eyes and his stubborn chin and the sweetest laugh. Her voice broke. She was the only good thing that came from those years, and now she's gone, and I couldn't even mark her grave properly because we were running from the law again. Silas reached for her hand. She pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. This is why I didn't want you to know me, she whispered. Every time you peel back a layer, there's just more pain underneath. Lila, your husband was a bastard. Sam interrupted. Pardon my language, ma'am, but it's true. Saw how he treated you when he'd drink. Saw the bruises. He stood, pacing to the window. That little girl, though, she was sunshine. Remember her playing in the dirt while Jack planned his crimes. Innocent as morning. You knew Clara? Knew her. Carved her a wooden horse once. She named it Thunder. Sam's weathered face softened. When I heard about the fever that went through that camp, I wondered, I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Lila wiped her eyes. Will you help us? Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then, got a pencil? I'll write it all down. Every detail I remember, the planning, the job, the poker game, should be enough to prove you had nothing to do with it. While Sam wrote. Silas led Lila outside. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of fire. Why didn't you tell me about Clara? Because it hurts too much. Because I failed her. Because admitting she existed means admitting I brought a child into that hell and couldn't protect her. Lila's voice was raw. What kind of mother lets her baby die in a mining camp while her father drinks away stolen money? The kind who was trying to survive, the kind who had no choices. Silas turned her to face him. Tell me about her, about Clara. She was beautiful, curious about everything, always asking why the sky was blue or where birds went at night. She could sing before she could properly talk, just little nonsense songs that made my heart light. Tears streamed down Lila's face. The fever took her in 3 days. I tried everything, all my grandmother's remedies, all my prayers. Nothing worked. Jack was gone on another job. I buried her alone, in a dress I'd made from my only good petticoat. I'm so sorry. I wanted to die too, almost did, from grief. But Jack came back, angry that I'd buried her without him, as if he'd ever acted like a father. She laughed bitterly. He hit me for crying, said I could make another baby easy enough. That's when I stopped feeling anything at all, just existed, until you. Silas pulled her into his arms, and this time she didn't resist. She sobbed against his chest, for Clara, for herself, for all the losses that had carved her hollow. I understand if this changes things, she said when the tears subsided. A woman who's lost a child, who carries that kind of grief, it changes things. He agreed, and her heart sank. It makes me love you more, because now I understand the strength it took to keep going, the courage it took to open your heart again after that kind of loss. Silas, Clara was part of you. That means she matters to me too. He tilted her chin up. Tell me more about her. Help me know her through your memories." So she did. As Sam finished his statement inside, Lila shared stories of her daughter, the way Clara would chase lizards but refuse to hurt them, how she'd share her meager food with hungry dogs, the fever that took her just 2 months after her 4th birthday. With each memory, the crushing weight of silence lifted slightly. Clara had existed. Clara had been loved. Clara would be remembered. When Sam emerged with several pages of closely written testimony, it was full dark. They made camp rather than risk the trail at night, sharing Sam's stew and listening to his stories of the old days, before the territory got civilized, before men like Jack Monroe turned outlaw for sport rather than necessity. "You could disappear," Sam suggested to Lila as they sat around the fire. "Take a new name, start fresh somewhere they've never heard of Jack Monroe." "I'm tired of running," Lila replied. "Tired of being someone else's idea of who I should be. If I leave Bitter Creek, it'll be with my head high and my name clear. Or in chains," Sam warned. "That marshal strikes me as the type who'd rather hang an innocent woman than admit he's wrong. Then we'll make it impossible for him to ignore the truth." Silas poked the fire, sending sparks skyward. "Your testimony, plus the letter Jack left, plus character witnesses from the town, it should be enough. Should be and will be are different creatures," Sam said. "But I'll do my part. Man gets to my age, he starts thinking about accounts that need settling. This feels like one of them." They rode back to Bitter Creek the next morning to find the town in uproar. Marshal Garrison had returned with 6 deputies and a territorial judge. He'd commandeered the hotel and turned it into a makeshift courthouse, summoning citizens for questioning about Lila's activities. "He's building a case," Father Miguel reported when they met at the mission. "Trying to prove you've been living beyond your means, that you must have hidden money." "Living beyond my means?" Lila laughed bitterly. "In a storage shed, washing altar cloths for room and board? Facts don't matter when a man's reputation is at stake." The priest said, "He needs someone to blame for not recovering that gold. You're convenient." "Then we make our own case." Silas handed over Sam's testimony. "This proves where the money went, combined with the letter and witnesses from town. It might work." Father Miguel agreed. "If the judge is honest. Judge Thornton's honest enough," Doc Baxter said, entering with Margaret Olson. "But he's also political. If Garrison's promising him support for higher office, then we need to make supporting Lila the political choice." Margaret's eyes gleamed with determination. "Leave that to me." What followed was 2 days of legal maneuvering that felt more like war. Garrison presented his case, circumstantial evidence, innuendo, and implications that Lila's healing knowledge proved she was involved in criminal activities. Several townspeople testified, some helpfully, others clearly intimidated by the federal presence. When Lila's turn came to speak, she entered the makeshift courtroom in her best dress, still shabby, but clean and pressed. The room was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. She saw friendly faces, Father Miguel, Doc Baxter, families she'd helped during the sickness. But she also saw doubt, curiosity, and in some cases, lingering hostility. "State your name for the record," Judge Thornton instructed. "Lila Monroe." Her voice was steady. "Widow of Jack Monroe, mother of Clara Monroe, deceased, healer trained by my Mojave grandmother, and citizen of Bitter Creek." For the next hour, she told her story. Not just the facts Garrison wanted, her marriage, Jack's crimes, her ignorance of the stolen money, but the truth of her life. The girl sold to pay a debt. The woman who endured brutality to protect her child. The mother who lost everything and kept going anyway. The healer who saved the very people who scorned her. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Sam Briggs stood in the back, hat in hand. "I got something to say," he announced. Garrison tried to object. Sam wasn't on the witness list, but Judge Thornton overruled him. Sam's testimony was devastating to the prosecution. He laid out exactly how the robbery occurred, how Jack had betrayed his partners and lost the gold within days. He produced names, dates, places, details only an insider would know. "Why should we believe an outlaw?" Garrison demanded. Because this outlaw's got no reason to lie. Sam replied, I'm old, sick, and got maybe a year left if I'm lucky. Figured I'd use it to tell the truth for once. Margaret Olson had done her work well, one by one. Prominent citizens stood to speak for Lila, not just about her innocence, but about her character. The baker whose son she'd tried to save, the seamstress whose fever she'd broken. Even Prudence Hartwell, in a shocking turn, admitted that while she might not approve of Lila's past, she couldn't deny her good works in the present. Through it all, Silas watched from his position by the door, hand near his gun in case Garrison tried anything desperate. Their eyes met once across the crowded room, and Lila drew strength from the steadfast love she saw there. Finally, Judge Thornton called for silence. This is a complex case, he began. But complexity doesn't change facts, and the facts are these. No physical evidence links Mrs. Monroe to the stolen gold. Multiple witnesses testify to her character and her ignorance of her husband's crimes. The testimony of Mr. Briggs, while coming from a questionable source, is detailed and consistent with known facts. He turned to Garrison. Marshal, you've failed to produce anything beyond suspicion and supposition. In the absence of real evidence, I must find in favor of the defendant. Mrs. Monroe is free to go. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others muttered, but Lila heard none of it. She was too busy being swept into Silas's arms, too busy crying tears of relief and joy. It's over, he murmured into her hair. You're free. But even as she clung to him, Lila knew better. Legal freedom was one thing, true freedom, from the past, from the ghosts, from the woman Jack Monroe had forced her to become. That would take longer. Still, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand for her, held by a man who loved her not despite her scars, but because of the strength they represented, she began to believe it might be possible. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 8 years, Lila Monroe was walking it as herself. Not as property, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd earned her place through courage, compassion, and the kind of steel-spined grace that only comes from surviving the worst and choosing to become better because of it. Outside, the sun was setting over Bitter Creek, painting the sky in shades of hope, and in the mission that night, Lila lit a candle for Clara, not in grief this time, but in gratitude. Her daughter might be gone, but her memory lived on, and her mother, finally, was free to build a life worthy of that precious legacy. 10 years passed like seasons in the desert, slowly at first. Then, all at once, Lila stood at the window of the new schoolhouse, watching her students scatter into the afternoon sun. The building smelled of fresh pine and chalk dust, a monument to how much Bitter Creek had changed. How much she had changed. Mrs. Boone, can I help clean the boards? She turned to find young Tom Henley, eager as always, bouncing on his heels. The boy reminded her painfully of another child, one who would have been 14 now, had fever not stolen her away. Thank you, Tom. Be careful with the erasers. The door opened, bringing a gust of October wind and her husband. Silas had silver threading through his dark hair now, laugh lines deeper around his eyes, but he still made her heart skip when he smiled that particular way. Sheriff Boone, she said formally, though her eyes danced. What brings you to my classroom? Can a man visit his wife without cause? He crossed to her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I do have news. Letter came on the afternoon stage. She recognized the careful script immediately. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Silas reading over her shoulder. Dear Mrs. Boone, my name is Samuel Winters. You wouldn't remember me. I was just another nameless child dying of fever 12 years ago. But you saved my life with your medicines and kindness. I'm a doctor now. Graduated from medical college back east. I wanted you to know that your example inspired me to heal others as you healed our town. The enclosed photograph is of the plaque we're putting up at the new hospital in Tucson, the Clara Monroe Children's Ward, named for your daughter you told me about during those long nights. May her memory be a blessing, as you have been to so many, with deepest gratitude. Dr. Samuel Winters. The photograph showed a bronze plaque with Clara's name and dates, along with the words, "In memory of innocence lost but not forgotten," and the mother who turned grief into grace. Lila sank onto a bench, tears streaming down her face. Silas sat beside her, pulling her close. "She's remembered," Lila whispered. "My baby is remembered. Of course she is. How could anyone forget the daughter of Lila Boone?" Through the window, she could see the cemetery where Jack lay buried, his grave still bare of ornament, visited only by tumbleweeds. But beside it now stood a small headstone she'd added 5 years ago. Clara Monroe, beloved daughter, dancing with angels. Fresh flowers adorned it weekly, placed there by various townspeople who'd learned her story. "Mrs. Boone." Tom had finished with the boards, watching them with concern. "Are you sad?" "No, Tom." She wiped her eyes, smiling. "Sometimes we cry when our hearts are too full for words." The boy nodded as if this made perfect sense and scampered out. Lila stood, composing herself. "I should prepare tomorrow's lessons. Actually, I had another reason for coming." Silas pulled out a second envelope. This arrived too, from the territorial office. She opened it, scanned the contents, then had to read it again to believe it. "They want me to train midwives and healers for the territory. Create a program mixing traditional medicine with modern techniques. Paid position. Good salary. Travel required." Silas watched her carefully. It would mean leaving Bitter Creek for weeks at a time. But coming back. Always coming back. This is home. He touched the silver locket she wore. Inside were pictures of Clara, and one of them on their wedding day. "What do you think?" "I think—" She looked around the classroom she'd built from nothing, at the town visible through the window, the town that had once rejected her and now called her their own. "I think Clara would want her mother to help as many children as possible." That evening, they walked to the Hidden Falls as they did every anniversary of the day they first kissed there. The years had been kind to their secret place, still green, still peaceful, still theirs. They spread a blanket and watched the sunset paint the canyon walls. "Do you ever regret it?" Lila asked. "Taking up with Jack Monroe's widow. It cost you votes in the last election, and I still won by a landslide." He pulled her against his side. "Besides, I didn't take up with Jack Monroe's widow. I fell in love with Lila Monroe, healer, teacher, survivor, and the strongest woman in the territory. Sweet talker, truth teller." He kissed her softly. "Any regrets for you?" She thought about it. The hard years, the gossip that never fully died, the children they'd tried for but never conceived, as if her body could only carry Jack's seed and no other. The nights she still woke trembling from nightmares, the way certain sounds or smells could still transport her back to those 8 years of hell. "No," she said finally. "Every scar, every loss, every hard day led me here, led me to you, led me to become who I was meant to be." She touched his face. "Though I do wonder sometimes, what would you have done if I'd left that morning? If you hadn't found me on the road? I'd have followed you, to the ends of the earth if necessary." His voice was certain as sunrise. "Some things are worth any distance." They stayed until full dark, then rode home beneath a canopy of stars. Their house, a proper one now, with rooms for guests and shelves full of medical texts, glowed with lamplight. Inside, evidence of their life together filled every corner, his spare badge on the mantel, her herbs hanging from the rafters, photographs of town celebrations where they stood side by side, respected and loved. That night, Lila sat at her desk to answer young Dr. Winter's letter. As she wrote, she could feel the weight of the past, not gone, never gone, but transformed into something bearable, something that gave weight and meaning to the present rather than poisoning it. "Dear Dr. Winters," she wrote, "your letter brought me more joy than words can express. To know that Clara's name will bring healing to other children, there is no greater gift you could have given me. Thank you for remembering, and for becoming the healer I always saw in that frightened boy. May you save many lives, and may you remember that sometimes the greatest medicine is simply refusing to give up on someone." A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up to find Silas holding a cup of tea, his eyes soft with understanding. "Come to bed," he said gently. "The letter will keep." She took his hand, rising from the desk. Tomorrow there would be lessons to teach, patients to tend, a new program to plan. There would be challenges and triumphs, sorrow and joy, the full measure of a life lived wholly. But tonight, she was simply Lila Boone, walking hand in hand with the man who'd seen her at her lowest and loved her toward her highest. Behind them, the lamp cast their shadows on the wall, no longer solitary figures but a single shape, merged and inseparable. And somewhere in the star-drunk sky above Bitter Creek, a little girl named Clara danced with angels, finally at peace knowing her mother had found her way home. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. A young woman, perhaps 19, stood at their door holding a baby. She was thin, bruised, with the hollow eyes Lila knew too well. "Are you Mrs. Boone, the healer?" "I am. My name is Mary Carson. I heard that you help women like me, women who need to start over." Lila saw herself 13 years ago, desperate, alone, carrying nothing but grief and determination. Without hesitation, she opened the door wider. "Come in, Mary. You're safe here." As she settled the young woman and examined the baby, healthy despite everything, Lila felt the circle completing itself. She'd been saved by kindness, by love, by a town that eventually chose compassion over judgment. Now she could offer the same to others. Silas appeared in the doorway, took in the scene, and simply asked, "Should I make up the guest room?" This was their life now, not always easy, sometimes complicated, but always worth it. The outlaw's widow had become the town's salvation. The broken woman had become a healer of others, and the forbidden love between a sheriff and a damaged soul had become the bedrock of a life built on redemption. That afternoon, as Lila taught Mary how to make the herbal tea that would help her baby's colic, she thought of her grandmother, of Clara, of all the women who'd survived by wit and will alone. Their legacy lived on, not in gold hidden in the desert, but in every life saved, every kindness passed forward, every woman who learned she was more than her worst days. "Will it get easier?" Mary asked, holding her baby close. Lila met her eyes, one survivor to another. "Different. It gets different, and different can become better, if you let it." Through the window, she could see Silas talking to some ranchers, his badge glinting in the sun. He caught her eye and winked, that private smile playing at his lips. Tonight they'd share supper and stories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by hope and held by love, Lila Boone knew the truth that had taken her 40 years to learn. Sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in soil watered by tears, and sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get to see them bloom. As the sun set over Bitter Creek, painting the desert in shades of gold and promise, a lone figure could be seen at the cemetery, placing fresh wildflowers on a small grave. The woman there was no longer the outlaw's widow or the sheriff's forbidden desire. She was simply Lila, teacher, healer, wife, and keeper of memories both bitter and sweet. The desert wind carried her whispered words to the stone. "Dance free, my Clara. Your mama found her way home." And in the schoolhouse, the church, the homes of Bitter Creek, people would tell the story for generations of the woman who came to town with death and chose to bring life instead. The woman who proved that love, like water in the desert, can appear in the most unexpected places and transform everything it touches. The legend of Lila Boone, who was once Lila Monroe, would outlive them all. But for now, she was content to be simply herself, scarred but not broken, grieving but not bitter, loved beyond measure by a man who saw her truly, and finally, blessedly, free. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Lila and Silas's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine while telling it. Where are you listening from today? Please comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like our characters connected across their differences. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of love, redemption, and courage in the American frontier. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of their story resonated most with you? Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset of hope.